Good evening, everybody. I ask you just to remain standing, and I'll ask my chaplain to say prayers in a moment. For the benefit of any members of the public, before the formal proceedings of the meeting start, my chaplain will say a few words of prayers. If you don't wish to be present, you're more than welcome to step outside for that time. Thank you.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, in this Advent season, as Christians wait for and celebrate the birth of Christ, a time of waiting and preparation, Father, we acknowledge this evening that there is also a time of waiting and preparation in public life. So we pray this evening that the decisions and the discussions that take place will have wisdom and discernment attached to them, so that right decisions can be made for the people of this borough. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please be seated. Just a few words of housekeeping. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please also note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And could I also ask you please to switch off your phones or put them on silent. Right, item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Mrs Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Bean and from Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Watts.
And Councillor James. Thank you. Have any declarations of interest? Chief Exec.
Madam Mayor, if I can submit a declaration of interest in respect of paper E, the dismissal and disciplinary arrangements for senior statutory officers. At that point in the meeting, the Executive Director of Finance and Resources, the Head of Law of Governance, and I will leave the meeting for that item.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Tilbury.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Declaration of interest on the council tax paper.
No others? Right, item 3, Office of Mayor and Deputy Mayor for the year. In accordance with the method of choosing a Mayor and associated matters protocol, members are advised that Councillor Mrs Jane Frankham is invited to stand for election as Mayor at the next annual meeting of full council for the next municipal year. This is in order that the Mayor-elect may have notice of her election. Members are asked to show their support. Is that noted? Thank you. And the person next in seniority is elected Deputy Mayor at the annual meeting, and members are asked to note that Councillor Paul Frankham is the next senior member who has indicated his willingness to take up the role. Is that noted? Thank you. Right, item 4, minutes of the council meeting held on 22nd of October. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you looked at the minutes, you'll have noticed, as I'm sure all of our colleagues had, that the minutes do not record the votes on the decisions made at the last council. I specifically made reference to a request at that meeting for a recorded vote. When the response was given to me that all votes are now recorded electronically, and that is technically so, but they are not recorded or reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Now, there's no point in having a recorded vote that's not reflected in the minutes, and there is even less point in having a recorded vote requested in a meeting when the votes are already being recorded. So can I ask that you and the Chief Executive and other wise heads sort this out? Thank you.
We did have a discussion about this, and there is a little bit of confusion by the looks of it. For tonight's meeting, if we do have an electronic vote, perhaps if you could make it clear that you want an electronic recorded vote for tonight, and the officers are going to go and look at it, and for our next meetings we'll come up with a form of wording to differentiate between the two.
If I may, Madam Mayor, the simple answer to your question is I want all votes recorded in the minutes because they're already recorded. Thank you.
Councillor Cousins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I only wish to enforce Councillor Keating's point, and specifically looking back at the webcast at 2 hours 15 minutes in, Councillor Keating specifically requested a recorded vote, and Madam Mayor, you agreed to it, and it is not in the minutes.
I think the confusion arises that everybody believed that recorded votes were electronically and they are then up there. But for clarification and for the future, we will come up with some form of wording and the officers will email that around. But if we have that this evening, can we just clarify it that you want it in the minutes as a recorded? Right, thank you. Apart from that, everybody happy with the minutes? Councillor Biscoldi.
Sorry, please can I just clarify which meeting minutes we're talking about, because Councillor Keating's in the apologies section of last month.
I think you might be right.
But I think we still accept the jump.
We still accept the point. It's coming up for Christmas, so we'll be a bit generous on that. Right, so you're happy for me to sign off the minutes? I've lost my place in there. Right, we now move on to announcements. I have a number of announcements. Just to let you know that the Mayor's Charity Week in October raised a fantastic total of £2,437.78. So well done to the residents for supporting that. Basingstoke Choir sang in Festival Place last Saturday, the 5th of December, in aid of the charity appeal and raised £463.12. There will be a carol service on the 12th of December, that's this Saturday at 7 p.m. at St Michael's Church. So please do come along and support us at that. A few weeks ago, I received an email from Javeed Hamid, who is from a UK-wide Muslim charity with over 30,000 members and more than 100 branches in the UK. The charity celebrated their centenary in the UK and had been arranging a number of functions and events. Earlier this year, they held an annual charity walk and raised approximately £340,000. As they're celebrating their centenary year, their intention is to help at least 100 national and local charities. To this effect, they have been presenting £500 to various mayors and councils for their local charities. A £500 cheque was presented to me at the Interfaith Dinner in November. They have also donated a small gift of 2 books for each of the borough councillors. These books are on the table as you leave. Please help yourself if you wish to accept one. Basingstoke-and-Deane Borough Council won the Employer of the Year award at Inspire. Destination Basingstoke recognised that the council is dedicated to the development and training of our staff, committed to the welfare of staff and of creating a supportive business culture, and willing to explore and provide benefits for staff. The council was up against strong competition, including finalists Southern Communications and recruitment agency Beringer Tame. We impressed judges with the quality of our entry and our strong values that see us go the extra mile, both as an employer and employees, to the benefit of our residents. The award was sponsored by Haynes Watts, and one of the judges, David Smye of Haynes Watts, said, Our congratulations go to Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council as well-deserved winners of Employer of the Year 2015. The Council submitted an exemplary entry for this year's Employer of the Year category, demonstrating their full commitment to their staff. This was reinforced during our interviews with some of their employees who clearly look forward to coming to work each day. It was a pleasure to meet them. It's a lovely thing to say, and I think we as councillors all know that we have a very good staff here at the borough, so should we give them a round of applause? And another bit of good news. Basing View has been awarded an Enterprise Zone status as part of a wider multi-site LEP bid, which also includes a zone near Chertsey and in Whitehill and Borden. The Enterprise Zone will cover part of Basing View and comes into force on 1st of April 2017. Any business moving into the zone will benefit from a business rates relief, and business rates growth will be reinvested into the zones to bring forward development, improve infrastructure, invest in refurbishment and new build. So that just leaves me with one announcement. We can manage to get through our agenda this evening at a reasonable time. You're all invited to come back into the Mayor's Parlour for a Christmas drink. So it's up to you. I'll now hand over to the Chief Exec for some more announcements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got two announcements. The first one concerns the paper circulated in support of this meeting, and the second one is an update on devolution in the absence of the leader for this meeting. Firstly, members, please accept my apologies for the size of the bundle that you've received with the customary updates and amendment sheet. This is not ideal, and one of the traits of a good organisation, which we are, is that it provides members with documentation in good time for meetings. In the particular circumstances of this case, two things conspired against us. Firstly, the compressed meeting calendar in advance of Christmas meant that the Cabinet of the 1st of December had a number of recommendations that fall to be decided by this full Council on the 10th, and clearly those papers could not be sent out in advance. And secondly, there was a many-down executive committee, again with recommendations for this full council on the 1st of December, again with recommendations for this full council. So in addition to offering an apology, I've asked the Head of Law and Governance to review the forward calendar of meetings so that we can seek to minimise such an occurrence in the future where you have a large bundle after the main bundle, because it's not ideal. So I just wanted to say that. The second notice I've got is an update on devolution. The leaders of Hampshire, Southampton, Fareham, Isle of Wight and Basingstoke and Deane councils, together with the chairman of the EM3 Local Enterprise Partnership, on behalf of the wider Hampshire and Isle of Wight group, met with the Right Honourable Greg Clark, Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, on Tuesday the 17th of November in London for a challenge session. The challenge session afforded the Secretary of State the opportunity to review and discuss the proposal and give an indication of areas that were supported or endorsed, areas that would be unlikely to be supported, and areas requiring further work. The Secretary of State was broadly supportive about the prospect of a combined authority for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as a whole. There were, however, a number of areas where the Secretary of State suggested that further work was required. For example, in relation to housing, there was a desire from the Secretary of State for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight to demonstrate greater certainty of delivery, greater certainty of deliverability by reference to specific sites across the wider area. In relation to governance, there was a request to develop further ideas in relation to how decisions will be made in a combined authority. In response to this feedback, two member-led working groups have been established to look at these issues of housing and governance in further depth, and these discussions will continue into the new year.
Councillor Cupitt.
Madam Mayor, am I allowed to ask the Chief Executive a question in relation to those two announcements?
It is just an update. The answer is no. Right. Item 6, questions from the member of the public. We have none.
On what basis in the Constitution have you said that the member can't ask a question of a report? Mayor, please.
Well, we did agree this is an announcement, and we made a special exception that the leader would normally give an update on devolution about 2 meetings ago. I have been advised it is an announcement, so there are no questions. We don't normally ask questions on announcements. Item 6, I think we just covered questions from the member of the public. We have none. Item 7, petitions. We have none. Item 8, resignations and appointments. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On CEP reserves, please, can I replace Councillor Nigel Pearce with Councillor Jack Cousins?
Councillor Mrs Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is on outside bodies. Carl of the Arts, Councillor Rob Golding to step down, and I will replace him. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Outside bodies again, Councillor Keith Watts for Whitchurch Youth Centre Trust, because I understand he's down with the kids in his hood.
Right, item 9, reports for decisions. Invite Councillor Isaac to introduce the Manydown Executive Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but I'm the chairman of the Executive Committee.
Oh.
Okay. The Manydown Executive Committee met on the 1st of December, and the recommendations that we were to consider comments of the Manydown Overview Committee in respect to the matters contained in this report, which we did. Note the progress made with the Manydown project and the DCLG studies, we did. Approves the provisional response to the Oakley and Dean Neighbourhood Plan, Regulation 16 consultation by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, LPA, we did. And approve the request to release 25,000 grant funding received from government to fund the DCLG studies. The Manydown Executive Committee is also requested to recommend to Council to approve the release of the balance of the DCLG funding to enable payment to Hampshire County Council and EM3 and final payment to Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, consultants and contractors during the course of 2015 and 16. And to this we agreed. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Ostleton, there might have been a misunderstanding. Did you say the release of, it was understood 25,000, it's actually 250,000?
Pardon, yes, 250.
Is that agreed? Agreed? Right, we then go on to number 2, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, and that one I believe is Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Paper G, yes. This is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. This is for the 6-month period to the 30th of September 2015, and Council is invited to note the contents of the report.
Thank you. Is that noted? Yeah, thank you. And then number 3, Revenue and Capital Budget Forecast. Again, Councillor Isaac.
Secondly, that any additional unused or
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Slight order here. The under B, item number 4, I'm going to take next because, again, it's a report and recommendation made by Cabinet or committee. So could I invite Councillor Mr Edwards to introduce the paper, please?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report concerns the appointment of a new Executive Director of Borough Services for the Council. A subcommittee of the HR Committee has been dealing with this appointment, and the subcommittee was chaired by myself and was politically proportionate. The report includes details of the rigorous selection process which has been undertaken, which culminated in an assessment day on the 30th of November with 4 candidates who undertook a range of assessments during the course of the day. After considering carefully all of the feedback from the various stakeholders involved in the assessment day, the subcommittee decided to invite back 2 candidates for a final assessment day on the 7th of December. This involved the candidates giving a presentation on a topic previously unseen until shortly before the interview. This was then followed by a formal interview lasting 1 hour on both occasions. At the conclusion of this process, it was agreed by all members of the subcommittee to recommend to Council the appointment of Rebecca Emmett as the new Executive Director of Borough Services. Rebecca is currently Head of Regulatory Services at Three Rivers District Council. She has a solid background in managing wide-ranging, large-scale public services, including planning, building control, parking assets and facilities management, environmental health, licensing, housing and community safety. Therefore, I ask the Council to appoint Rebecca Emmett as the Executive Director of Borough Services.
Are you agreed on that? Thank you. Right, now we go to section B. Council tax discretionary discounts and council tax support scheme. Full council is required to set the level of council tax discretionary discounts prior to setting the council tax for each financial year, and the council is also required to approve a local council tax support scheme by 31st January 2016. This report proposes no changes to the current level of council tax discretionary discounts covering properties subject to repair, unoccupied and unfurnished properties, long-term empty properties and second homes. No changes are proposed to the existing council tax support scheme previously approved by the council. Everybody agreed? Agreed? Thank you.
As
Councillor
always,
Leake.
I'm not going to say my little bit, but I oppose this paper, and I would vote against, and I wish my vote... Sorry? I have it on. I'll speak louder. I wish my vote against to be recorded. Thank you. In accordance with Councillor Keating's regulations.
Are you happy just to have your name recorded as voting against, or do you want us to go for an electronic vote of the whole chamber?
I'll think about it. No, I just wish it to be recorded. I've voted consistently against this ridiculous rule for 10 years, and I'm not going to change my mind on the last occasion.
All right, thank you. Right. Number 2 is paper B. That's to remind members as well that a dispensation has been granted under Part 5 of the Code of Conduct and means all members can debate and vote on this paper. Is everybody happy with the paper? Is it agreed? No. Councillor Leake.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it's me, I think. Sit down.
All right, Councillor Philibert.
Are you ready? In the light of all the charges that we're enforcing on our residents, and in the much advertised austerity cuts, do you think that it would be a good example not to take a rise in members' allowances?
that your maiden speech? No, 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 it's not. Councillor Leake?
Madam Mayor, the older members will remember that when I was leader, I suggested that 20p a mile for cycling was quite a ridiculous amount of money. And I managed to persuade you to cut it to 10. Even that's excessive. After all, they pay no contribution to road maintenance or anything else. So I do question why we still got 20p for cycling here when you only get 45p in a motor car. And I leave you all to think about it, but next time you consider it, you might want to reduce that, because it's another way of reducing our cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we agreed on that paper? Councillor James?
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak briefly because someone's indicated that we should freeze, and I stand up and make this speech every year when we talk about freezing. I always find it very strange that I sit at work all day across the road, and when I get offered no pay rise for the 7th year in a row, I get trade unionists telling me that it's outrageous, that the cost of living is going up, the financial demands of my family are increasing, and I should be demanding a pay rise. I then cross the road to this council chamber, I come in here, I sit down with the same family demands and financial responsibilities, and then when I take a 1% pay rise, I'm accused that's outrageous, what an awful thing to do. So it never makes any sense to me anyway. I think it's absolutely critical that we make sure that this is a diverse chamber, as diverse as we can make it, and we should never put anyone off standing for election. Now, clearly, if you're of a working age, it means you often take sacrifices in terms of your career or in terms of overtime in order to attend council meetings. I would hate to price people out of attending council meetings and make democracy something that only the time-rich and cash-rich can afford to do. So for those reasons, I will support the 1% increase. I think it's absolutely right and fair. I did have a final matter, but I've lost the wrong piece of paper. Finally, the council allowance, of course, the council give it to you. They don't prescribe what you do with it. So if you do feel you don't need the money, there are lots of worthy causes in your ward you can contribute to. You can give money quietly to charity. You can refuse the pay rise. You can actually do what you like with that money. You don't have to take it all and spend it on yourself. So rather than anyone making a judgment call that it's wrong to accept a 1% pay rise, I think it's upon us all to decide our own personal circumstances and how we treat the increase that we're being offered. I think 1% is perfectly fair and reasonable. I would also suggest that the council review its policy to make sure they still have this ability for members of the council staff to purchase a bike at discount from the council. I think we had the policy before. Perhaps Councillor Leake would like to buy a bike and save himself a lot of money and also get fit at the same time.
Madam Mayor, he mentioned my name. Can I... twice, I think. And I'm perfectly fit. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mrs Cubitt.
Yeah, also on page 27 of 39 there's a section entitled Renunciation. So any councillor may, as point number 7, by notice in writing to the Executive Director, elect to forgo any of his or her entitlement.
No more hands. Are we agreed with the paper? Agreed. Thank you. Number 3, dismissal and disciplinary arrangements for senior statutory officers, and I believe some of our officers are now had declared interest at the beginning. This relates to the dismissal and disciplinary arrangements for senior statutory officers. These are the head of paid service, section 151 officer and monitoring officer. Councillor asked to agree the changes that have come about due to a change in legislation. We agree the paper? Agreed. Thank you. Well, they did threaten, so you were very prompt. Right, we now move on to notices of motion. The first one, keeping concessionary fares free. Councillor Mrs James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The bus pass was first introduced in 2001. Take-up is high. Around 4/5 of those eligible for bus pass apply and get one. The Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservatives committed themselves to protecting the free bus pass for older and disabled people in their 2015 manifesto. The devolution prospectus that was signed off by the council leader and sent to the government in September says that a recent Hampshire County Council consultation on bus subsidy reductions indicated that concessionary pass holders would potentially be happy to contribute to the cost of their journeys. It then proposes that a new Hampshire Combined Authorities would localise the National Concessionary Fares scheme in Hampshire. As you can see from our motion, there are over 250,000 concessionary pass holders in Hampshire, and they are pensioners, residents who are blind or partially sighted, those who are profoundly or severely deaf, those who have a disability or injury, those who have severe learning disability, those who are a member or a veteran of the armed services who have been seriously injured in service. These are our residents, and that the authors of the devolution prospectus now think will be able to pay towards their bus pass. The county consultation was open to bus users and non-bus users alike. You could complete it online, you didn't need to be a bus user, and you didn't need to have a bus pass to take part in the process. You didn't even need to live in Hampshire to complete it. In fact, a number of the organisations responding were outside of Hampshire. How can 211 out of 3,200 responses be used to produce a statement that says concessionary pass holders would potentially be happy to contribute to the cost of their journeys? Under the provisions of the Transport Act 2000, it is illegal to make people pay towards the free national statutory bus pass scheme. County has already cut subsidies for public transport. This council now spends more than the Transport Authority on buses, or subsidising buses, sorry. We know that the usage keeps routes alive, that if people in rural and urban areas are forced to pay, that will reduce usage, threatening routes. If you live in Whitchurch and want to get to Newbury, you will be crossing borders. Now your national bus pass will allow you to do that. If the change proposed in the prospectus is allowed, there will be two schemes operating, one in Hampshire and one in the rest of the country. These concessionary bus passes are a lifeline to many people, and I don't want to see this lifeline being reduced. We were promised that devolution would not reduce or threaten services. People would not be worse off because of devolution. I really hope that you can join us, the Labour group, this evening and agree that this council does not support introducing a contribution to the cost of the journey for those with concessionary bus passes, and the council agrees that this is a further red line that the leader of the council should communicate to those involved in the devolution process. For us in the Labour group, this is a red line that we will not cross on devolution.
Councillor Reagan, you seconding?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to declare an interest to start with. I am a bus pass holder, and for me, and like for many of my constituents, it's a freedom pass. It frees up a lot of my residents who are probably trapped home during the day to be able to get on the bus and just go to town, get a bit of shopping, come home. Otherwise, they will be paying £4 return, £4.10 out their pensions, etc. That's where most people use them, and actually school children who have to pay just bring it in. Children have to pay 2/3 to on stagecoach buses. But anyway, disabled and people with old age people with bus passes don't pay anything, which is great. And it was a bus pass system brought in by that wicked Labour government, by Gordon Brown, if you all remember. But if any charge is ever brought in, and heaven forbid it is, it might be a small token the first year, 10 pence. Forever, it will always go up every year till the past becomes worthless. Some of us might remember when prescription charges were in very low rate. What is it now? It's not 2 and 6 anymore, it's £8. That would be the principle on the bus passes. So to actually mix this into the devolution bit is a step too far for me. The real enemy, if you really want to do something about this, is the 1985 Transport Act, and the old Liberal Act that deregulated buses and quite significantly did away with cross-line subsidies. So if number one was making a profit, number two was not making a profit, they could share the money and it was subsidised. And that kept buses going. But once they become, that was outlawed in 85, you got and deregulation, you got the big boys moving in and actually saying, then cutting lines, and lo and behold, the taxpayer would come in and pay a subsidised route. That's the real problem. If we want to do anything, it's have a look out a bit further and go for a campaigning against the 1985 Transport Act. That's the real problem. So if we just, for some bureaucratic arrangement, that we put a charge onto bus passes, you try and explain that to that in May, because I certainly will. And I should be telling the Tories to put it on. So, and it would be a great campaigning issue. There isn't, if you walk through my estate, anywhere around town on the estate, say, do you want to charge on your bus passes? They would say no, there's no point in having a bus pass. So, and people are not stupid, they go back to the more original point. Once you get a charge, it will go up every year upon year upon year, and it will. So, I say to vote for this motion because we do not want bus passes sacrificed on the altar of devolution. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Osselton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Concessionary fares offer certain sections of society the opportunity to travel for free or at a reduced fare on public transport. The rationale underlying the provision is a desire to reduce the transport-related aspects of social exclusion amongst vulnerable sections of society, and particularly those on low incomes. As such, it is groups such as the elderly and disabled who are the beneficiaries of the majority of travel concessions. The principles of concessionary travel provision in the UK were formalised under the 1985 Transport Act. However, it was not until the Transport Act 2000 that a statutory minimum concession was provided for the elderly and disabled in England. In 2005, the Act was amended to ensure that all qualifying elderly and disabled people must be issued upon application with a free fare bus pass with no administrative charge. The Office for National Statistics reports that 33,412 people in Basingstoke and Deane qualify for an older person's concessionary bus pass. Out of this, Hampshire County Council has advised that only 22,817 people, which is actually 68%, hold a bus pass. This is distinct from the 3,269 holders of a disabled or companion pass and the 1,224 holders of travel vouchers. 10,595 qualifying older residents therefore choose not to avail themselves of free bus travel. Recent UK studies have shown that lonely and socially isolated older people are more likely to have early admission to residential or nursing care. People with poorer mental health can also be significantly impacted by loneliness and social isolation. It can affect self-esteem and the way people see themselves, or because of stigma. Loneliness and social isolation in remote rural areas can be hidden or go unnoticed. Evidence on efforts to reduce social isolation have demonstrated positive outcomes for well-being, reduced mortality and morbidity, reduced utilisation of services and good return on investment. So I certainly know what it does do to people. The devolution document from which the quoted passage forms the basis of this motion does not give any detail nor views of users' acceptability of this proposal. Neither does it indicate the local government acceptance to such a legislative change. This came from government. The devolution document is a prospectus and not a binding document and will require further consultation. This, I feel, is not the time to be declaring red lines, and I'll leave that to Councillor Richards to expound. My view is that there is insufficient detail in the devolution document and further information is required to fully understand the implications and mechanisms by which a localised scheme is likely to operate. I therefore oppose this motion until I have more facts available to me on which I can base an informed decision, and I'm not scaremongering the people of Basingstoke because this has not gone as far. It is just in the document. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's already made clear by Councillor Ossleton. The current concessionary fares are set by legislation in national government. We have no control over national government. We can't redline national government. They would have to change the law and then rattle it down to the Transport Authority, which is currently the County Council. We have absolutely no control over the County Council. We're the Borough Council. So it's only if, and it's a very unlikely if, the national government changed the law and then they decide to pass it down to the Transport Authority and we end up with our combined authority. At that point they could decide to do something different. All that is a very, very long way off. And I'm a little bit concerned that there are a lot of people who have their concessionary fares. It's the only way they get to see their grandchildren. It's the only way they get to the shops. And they will see the papers today and they'll be frightened and scared. And I'm always very dubious of anyone who decides to put out press releases based on a random comment in a potential document that scares people in their own homes. I think that's outrageous behaviour. There is no current plans to change the concessionary bus scheme at all, and if it came to this authority, I'm sure we'd oppose it. One of the things, of course, is with localism, localism means that government stops saying you have to do things. It's now down to local authorities to how they deal with it. Now, one thing I've picked up in the years I've been in this chamber is generally there's a common view around the chamber that the current bus service is not fit for purpose. And certainly if you're one of those people, and we've heard thousands are allowed to apply for a bus pass but don't, it's because for a bus pass you do really need the bus. And a lot of places don't actually have them. I understand there's no bus between Whitchurch and Newbury, which is something that was quoted earlier. So obviously great for the people of Whitchurch to have a bus pass to Newbury, but without the bus they're not going to get there. I would like to see some students have bus passes because students don't have any income. Pensioners do, but they don't have bus passes. I'd like to see job seekers have bus passes so they can get to interviews, but they don't. How do you extend a scheme? How do you provide more buses late at night so more people can use the bus pass and use the concessionary fares? All that document says is someone come up with the idea that I wonder if we should look at it again. I wonder if we should rethink it over the next couple of years to see if we can extend concessionary fares to more people and extend buses to more people by reviewing the system. I have no harm with a review of the system, but I don't think it's at this stage that we should be panicking people in their own homes. I certainly think the current bus service is poor. I think the concessionary fares is a wonderful thing and I'd love to keep it for elderly, for disabled. I'd like to extend it, but obviously there's a limited pot of money in which to do it with. It seems strange that Labour, having spent a lot of recent years saying that the current bus service is appalling and it needs to be improved, are now turning round and saying that we must keep it exactly as it is. One thing I would say is there are a number of pensioners here tonight. I'd be interested to know how many pensioners have a bus pass and how many plan to get a bus home from this meeting tonight. That will give you a tale of the problem with bus passes.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors Mrs James and Councillor Regan have, it would seem, very wisely studied the prospectus for a Hampshire Combined Authority. This is a substantial document and has been submitted to the Department for Communities and Local Government, spelling out the case for devolution of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. My fellow councillors, Mrs James and Councillor Regan, have clearly read it diligently. It is a document which put forward reasons showing how devolution could bring greater prosperity to our region and proposes a range of powers which central government should devolve to the region in order for us to achieve this prosperity and the ensuing benefits to the people of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. This document is excellent though it is, and here I would like to congratulate our Chief Executive Officer and leader of this Council, and of course those officers and members who have assisted and supported them, together with their counterparts from the other regions or authorities in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight who have compiled this prospectus. It is a first draft document, a proposal, a document which provides a basis for further negotiation. It is not a document that sets everything in stone. It is not an Ed Miliband headstone. We must not make Ed Miliband's mistake, a mistake which I believe may be viewed as a costly mistake by some members of this chamber. We must be wiser. We must not tie our hands at this very early stage in a negotiation. This most certainly is not the moment to be declaring red lines. If I look at the tactics of some of the most forceful and effective negotiators from this country in recent times, Hugh Scanlon, Vic Feather, Len Murray, Arthur Scargill, they kept their opponents guessing. They certainly made demands, outrageous demands, but they knew that at the outset of any negotiation they had to keep all options open. We must learn from their wisdom. Further to Councillor Mrs James and Councillor Regan's study of the devolution prospectus, which covers a multitude of issues, they have singled out concessionary bus fares as the one issue to challenge. As Councillor Mrs Osselton has made clear, concessionary bus fares provide an important and in some cases a vital resource to certain sections of society. She has highlighted their importance to helping to reduce and avoid social exclusion, particularly with regard to the elderly and the disabled. I emphatically acknowledge the importance of concessionary bus fares, and they have my wholehearted support. Councillor Mrs James and Councillor Regan quote figures from a Hampshire County Council consultation which has been interpreted as supporting a willingness for concessionary pass holders to make a contribution towards the cost of their journeys. As a scientist, I have to challenge the statistical validity of the figures quoted, and here we need to sympathetically consider the view of Councillor Mrs James and Councillor Regan. They have brought to our attention a possible weakness in the supporting data. However, it is not correct to conclude, and I quote, "This is a completely inaccurate statement," although clearly a more detailed analysis is required. I have considered the motion carefully and concluded that I cannot support it. Free or contributory concessionary bus passes must not endanger the progress of the devolution negotiations, as stated in the current edition of the Basingstoke Observer. The data on which this motion is based is thin, and further, as I hope I have effectively argued, this is most definitely not the time to engrave the sanctity of free concessionary bus passes in stone. Now is the time to keep all our options open. I urge you to reject this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Oh, sorry.
Is that maiden speech? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had the pleasure of working with Arthur Scargill during the miners' strike, and I can assure you he was very focused indeed. And the options he kept open were one of protecting people's jobs and not keeping options open that would not require people to keep their jobs. It's beyond belief, really, that we're having to have this debate. I cannot understand why a simple issue like concessionary passes shouldn't just go through on the nod. Surely we all agree that we give concessionary fares to people. In my ward, some of the most socially deprived people in the borough deserve concessionary passes, they deserve free passes, they deserve free transport passes. I'd want to turn now to the definition of public transport. And I really do wish that this country had public transport. But for years now, and ever since the 85 Act, we don't have public transport.
We have transport facilities that are run by private organisations, are run for a profit, and Stagecoach themselves have admitted in our committee rooms that they would not run a route unless it made money. So that we don't actually have public transport. It's all private. So the introduction and the use of concessionary passes and fares at least brings that back. I think it's absolutely timely that we make the statement from this chamber that we are going to support people who require free public transport and that we will support concessionary fares irrespective of what's in the devolution document. I think that is a line worth drawing, and I would urge you to vote for the motion.
Councillor Putty? Councillor Putty?
I've got my name. No, I wasn't intending to speak, but everything has been...
Sorry, the two of us have got your name down. Do you want to speak? We have got speakers.
No, that's fine. Everything has been said. I agree very much with Councillor James and Councillor Ossulton what they said. And I regret that people are scaremongering. And I also have to declare an interest that I have got a bus pass myself. So please note my interest regarding that. And scaremongering people in my patch and everywhere else is not a good way to go about it. And I am going to vote against this, and this is what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll also declare that I have a bus pass. I've never used it in the borough. In fact, I've only used it twice in about the last 5 years. Once was in York, and once we did in Edinburgh, where it was a subsidised fare, not a free fare. I read this motion with interest. I can understand that the provision of free fares is of great benefit to neediest pensioners and the disabled residents, and I would support its retention. However, that's not the question being addressed. In order to maintain and hopefully improve public transport services in the borough, would concessionary pass holders be willing to make some contribution towards the cost of their fares? There are several rural areas which never see a bus and remain isolated or dependent on the car for mobility. I would like to see this change for the better, though the indications are that any change would be to further reduce the coverage of the public transport facility. Current subsidies on some routes are ridiculously high and are very hard to justify. Far from referring to just 211 residents supported the idea, I would say that as many as 200 respondents supported the idea. These are likely to be in areas where the service is poor. Free fares are of no benefit where there's no service. So I support consideration of the question, and I don't support the motion.
Councillor Musson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. You know, I feel we're in a different universe somehow. Somebody used the words beyond belief, and I'd use them too, but I'd use them in a different context. Top of the list on the issues that I get for the last, I don't know, 6 months or more in Tadley, I'm speaking here about Tadley, have been buses. I think planning comes second, but it's been buses. And if the residents in Tadley were listening to us right now, they'd be laughing. They'd be saying what somebody else said, and that's, you need buses if you're going to use a pass. Now, somebody said to me, we do have buses in Tadley. Yeah, we might have, but I can tell you that I met with Stagecoach this week, and Hampshire County Council, and Peter Smith, our transport manager, just this week in the Stagecoach offices. And Stagecoach admitted to me that Route 2, this is the Basingstoke-Tadley service, is actually in crisis at the moment. That's the words that they would use. It is so bad that they have reported themselves to the Transport Commissioners, because, as I'm sure people are aware, who've read the Act, if the service gets too bad, then the Transport Commissioner can step in. So I asked them, why do you think it is so bad? And what they said was congestion, traffic congestion. And it's interesting because anybody who reads about Stagecoach will have noticed that they issued a press release this week about their shares. And one of the things they said was, I note says that in the UK, bus service has been affected by congestion in cities such as Manchester and Oxford, and in Basingstoke as well, although it isn't mentioned. So I did some stats and I had a look, and I found that if you take the main route from Basingstoke to Tadley, which is the A340, using Hampshire County Council's figures, there's between 10 and 12,000 vehicles a day using that route, sometimes more, many of them HGVs. When you have a look at why they're doing it, it's because they want a shortcut between junction 6 of the M3 and the A34 M4 junction. They don't want to travel all the way down to the A34, so they come through Tadley. And that is causing massive congestion. It's causing the buses to be late. You wouldn't believe how late. I mean, I get so many complaints, and I ask the people who complain to give me examples. Between 6 and 7 p.m. on a weekday, we're supposed to have 3 buses. It's not unusual to have no buses whatsoever. I have seen 2 buses at a stop, one discharging passengers and the other waiting to discharge, because they've got congested somewhere and they're all arriving at the same time. So this is, you know, I can understand somebody putting forward the motion, but it's not reality. It's not what my residents see. It doesn't address any of these problems. The only way to address this is better infrastructure. And I'll leave you with one thought, and that is that we have an opportunity in the local plan to do something about this. And I would say that what we should consider is a western bypass that joins Junction 6, or dualises Junction 6, all the way up somewhere to south of Newbury, where the A34 is, so that we can relieve the congestion on the A340, which is only going to get worse. If you look at the stats going back over years, it is getting worse and worse. And that is causing the problem. So right now, Stagecoach are telling me that they have lost lots of passengers, they're losing a lot more, the route is certainly not profitable, I'd question whether it's viable. This motion doesn't address it, and therefore I can't support it. What I would support would be anything that improves the infrastructure. I'll leave you with the words of a 23-year-old
Time's up.
Okay.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. I've got one more speak. Sorry? Just finish if you've got a quick sentence.
I said, so what do you think? She said, I can't wait to leave Tadley. There's nothing here for young people, and the public transport is rubbish. And that is coming from lots of people.
Councillor Harvey, there's a little time left.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to rise to say about the red lines and just say that we sat in this chamber in September and we discussed the red lines as part of the devolution debate, and this should be one of them. I think the other aspect of this that is crucial is that the actual figures, the documentation that's gone out to government is now going to result in some detailed negotiation with those civil servants. You've already put that line in there. We should not be agreeing to that. We should be sending a clear message for our residents, not scaremongering, that's a stupid thing to say. The reaction is that if you're going to go into negotiations in the next few months with DCLG, where one of the lines in your prospectus is to bring in charges as part of concessionary fares, a contribution from people, you shouldn't be doing that. And that's happening in the short term, not the long term. Those negotiations will begin. So it's right and timely and appropriate that we should put down a marker now and ask our council leader and our officers who are going into those negotiations not to have any truck with that. Why would we? I think 68% of take-up is actually not a bad majority. That's a pretty good example of how important this is to an awful lot of people. Bus passes do make a difference. Remember a 90-year-old lady I met during the general election. Superb campaigner for buses in Southam, Joan. Absolutely brilliant. Said it absolutely plainly. I can't get out, I can't go shopping, and I can't visit my friends without the buses. The buses are a lifeline to me. They make all the difference to my life. And the concessionary fares pass made a difference to her. Are you seriously telling me you want our officers and our council leader to agree to a devolution package that says we will force her to make a contribution to her concessionary fares pass? No, you're not. Then take the line out and don't go into that negotiation with it being in the prospectus, because governments have got the prospectus with that line in it. The DCLG have got the prospectus with that line in it, and you cannot justify it on the back of 211 responses from 3,200 people who decided to take part in the consultation, the sham consultation, which didn't actually ask the questions that should have been asked.
Councillor Harvey, your time's up.
You cannot justify a decision based on that. Please support the motion.
Councillor Miss James, you wish to sum up?
Yes, thank you. We had the Leader of the Council stand up and say to us in the debate on devolution that the paper going forward was going to improve people's lives, there was going to be no reduction in services, and we would only support it if things were better for the people of Basingstoke and Dean. And then we see today in the Observer, and I quote the Leader of the Council, he says, there are some people that wouldn't be against paying a little on rural areas rather than having no buses at all. I mean, where's the evidence for that? I mean, there's no evidence that says that, and I don't buy what he's saying. We may have a very poor service in rural areas. We may have a very poor service in urban areas, and I support Councillor Musson in what he's saying, and this paper isn't talking about the quality of the service. This is just talking about one aspect. We continually, as a Labour group, have grave concerns about the quality of our bus service in this town. So I support you in what you're saying, Councillor Musson, but this isn't about that issue. But there are many people in our town and in our borough who are reliant on a service, whether it's poor or it's bad. Why on earth would you put into a paper going forward a line that says that we would look at this? I mean, it's unacceptable, absolutely, totally unacceptable. If you look at the definition of prospectus, a formal summary of the proposed project, why include it as a possible proposal except to save money? This is about making cuts to services. This is what devolution is, and this is what you're looking to take forward. I don't think it's about scaremongering. I think it's really important that we are very clear on what we want from devolution going forward. We do not and we will not support devolution if this is part of it. And it is a red line, and we are saying to you very clearly now that we are not going to support a devolution paper at all if this is part of it, because we will not support a paper that has a possibility in it at all of charging for bus passes. So you're just very clear going forward, that's our position.
Right,
I have
a recorded vote that goes in the minutes. Right, just make sure we're quite clear. Okay. The electronic system, I'm just waiting to be told that it's ready. Right, it's ready. Votes now being closed. The vote is lost. We move on to the next one, opposing the reduction of new homes bonus to the local infrastructure fund. And I'll invite Councillor Jack Cousins to introduce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, tonight I move the motion regarding new homes bonus and specifically in relation to how Council splits and distributes this government grant. I want to make clear from the outset that our motion focuses purely and solely on any future allocations to the new homes bonus that will be brought to our borough over the emerging plan period, which is up to 2029, and not what has already been received. At present, the Cabinet have proposed to prop up the main budget by removing 87.5% of the local infrastructure fund from communities that will accept development. In one swift move, LIF moves from a 40% share to a 5% share. We believe it is only fair that wards who undertake new homes should get both the lion's share and the first bite of the cherry at using these funds to make any improvements to their communities. Indeed, our council website says the following in regards to LIF. We are keen for the communities that have provided more homes to get the funding they need to ensure their local infrastructure isn't overstretched. The fund means they can work with their local borough councillor to decide what would make the most difference in their area. At the November Scrutiny Committee, both the leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources tried to justify the changes by saying that the fund will be put into a general pot and that any community can apply for a grant but weighted towards those who have accepted development. However, this change means that wards who have actively and successfully opposed development are allowed the best of both worlds. It allows wards like Pamber and Silchester, where indeed one of their councillors has openly proclaimed that they have a shopping list of projects and will actively apply for other people's funding whilst not having any development. I have no doubt that if the Cabinet's proposal is agreed to, that they will succeed. While some members may think this smash and grab technique is all well and good, please spare a thought for those communities who will lose out. We know who there are. They're in the emerging local plan. It's the residents of Bramley, Chinham, Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, Sherburn St John, Rooksdown, Winklebury, Basing, Oakley and North Waltham. Those are the wards, the communities and the residents who will lose out. If you represent one of those wards, you should ask yourselves, do I want the residents I represent to lose important funding? Furthermore, if you're a Cabinet member whose ward would be significantly impacted by this change, can you honestly look your residents in the eye and say, taking your grant money away will benefit our ward? I think the answer is simple to both those questions. It's no. Think of all the projects that your communities will lose out on. Street furniture, centre managers, community hall refurbishments, installing or upgrading playgrounds and sports facilities. Are you prepared to turn your back on the needs of your community just to please the council leader? Madam Mayor, to show how much of an impact these changes have, I have looked at the local plan and worked out how much wards would lose due to these changes. As members know, new homes bonus is paid over a 6-year period once a home is delivered. For each Band D property, we receive £1,174 a year. So at the end of 6 years, each home earns us a grand total of £7,044. If the proposed lift changes take effect, in my ward alone, Brookvale and Kings Furlong, my residents will stand to lose £200,000 over the local plan period. If you live in Chinham, instead of receiving £450,000, you'll only receive £50,000. If you live in Eastrop, instead of receiving £530,000, you will receive £67,000. Residents of Sherburn St John will see their lift pot reduced by £1.1 million and only receive £158,000. The residents of Basing will lose £1.3 million from their lift pot and only receive £190,000. If you live in Bramley, you stand to lose £2.4 million, and in North Waltham and Oakley, residents stand to lose £3.2 million. Unsurprisingly, Madam Mayor, the Manydown development stands to lose the most. Under the current lift scheme, they would approximately receive £9.5 million. The proposed scheme would mean they receive £1.2 million, a loss of £8 million. When you spell out the changes like this, it is easy to see why we are keen to keep the scheme unchanged. Finally, Madam Mayor, I wish to urge councillors on all sides to unite behind this motion. It is a chance to show our residents that we all believe in localism. It is a chance to show that we believe in giving residents the power and ability to identify faults and improvements, to create the resolutions, to own the projects and make the important decisions to improve our communities.
Your time's up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to talk about the original intentions of the lift, really, and the consequences of development. And it was fascinating because last night I went to the feedback session on Manydown at the the Haymarket, run by the Anvil's Trust. And it was very interesting to listen to the presentation because it spoke about the impact of development and how we wanted quality and we wanted to build and understand the importance of legacy. And I agree with that. I think legacy is incredibly important, and a part of legacy is the relationship that exists between existing communities and the new communities that are created. And this money, the relationship between the communities and this money is important because it's about bridging the gaps between them. A 5% pot of money going forward simply isn't going to do that. Now, the administration may have an ongoing problem of financing its capital programme across its bigger strategic projects, but the solution is not to take the new homes bonus money allocated for local areas to spend on their major strategic projects. You're setting up a conflict here between communities and the administration's major projects, and that's just daft. 40% was allocated in the original scheme for the strategic spending. 40% was given to local areas for their priorities. Now, we debated that, and it was a hard debate at the time, but it was a reasonable split, considering the priorities, and they are competing priorities. But a 70% to 5% split is not fair. Even if you ring-fence what was, you are still going to take a significant proportion of the money that would have been allocated and should be allocated, and it is nothing short of a raid and a grab on those local communities' pots of money. I remember many years ago sitting in this chamber and being berated by members opposite when Section 106 monies were taken from Chinham and Kebshot and Hatchwarren. You're doing the same to those communities again. This is about your communities, our residents and their local interests in regard to what New Homes Bonus was originally intended for in this council's view, and what we should actually be putting it towards in the future in terms of their local infrastructure and their needs. You know, the government are already going to top slice New Homes Bonus. They're already going to take a huge chunk of it after the Treasury announcements from the Chancellor. They're already going to have a portion of it. You're then talking about reducing it even further for those local communities and having this central pot that everybody can apply to. And you might weight it in favour of some of those that have taken development. But as my colleague says, as Councillor Cousins says, that means everybody who perhaps hasn't taken development or has opposed development can equally apply and take money away from those that are now seeing it and suffering the consequences of it. And we talked about infrastructure and the impact of buses and congestion in Tadley. Well, just think what some of this money can do in those communities to address some of those localised issues. I certainly know what a difference it could make in my ward, and I'm sure others can think of the same in their wards with their community associations, their residents groups, and all of those organisations they would seek to work with to make the most of that money to the benefit of those local areas. So the communities are going to basically see it taken away from them when they shouldn't. It's already been said, and others know how to spend the money. Well, that's just a terrible statement to have made in that committee. I think it's a terrible statement to make, full stop. If Chinham and Ruxdown, Popley, Brighton Hill, Buxton, all the wards that we've listed off are going to lose out on this, really it is wholly inappropriate to be pushing it forward, and that's why we oppose it. We're standing up and saying, no, we don't want to see this in the budget. We don't want to see it. You're consulting on it. We're bringing a motion forward to say, no, we don't think this is the right way forward. Now, if the administration has got a hole in its capital funding for its major projects, this isn't about the way of going about filling it. It really isn't. If there's going to be going money on other schemes, on other major projects, then we should debate that and discuss that. And the 40% that you had for major strategic projects that was in the original proposals has actually made a difference. You can see the difference in what you've done with it. That's fair. And we're saying that that should continue. We can understand that. But what you shouldn't do is raid the local community pots in the way that you're proposing. There is a difference there, a fundamental difference, and it's being skewed way, way too far. So, Madam Mayor, the change proposed by the Cabinet is wrong. That's it, it's simple, it's wrong. And we shouldn't support it, I think, as a council. And we should stand up as ward councillors for our communities and say no. New Homes Bonus matters to us. We want to retain it in the way that it can make a difference to our communities. And if there are issues with the budget, and there are issues with major capital projects in this council, then that's a debate for another place and another time and another way. But you shouldn't be raiding our wards to make up the difference.
Thank you. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As most members in this chamber will be aware, the Local Infrastructure Fund is an issue that for me is a top priority. Getting infrastructure delivered in an area of new development at the optimal time is a constant focus for me and the residents of Ruxdown. LIF, as an allocation of the New Homes Bonus, was originally designed to provide communities impacted by housing development with money for key infrastructure. I believe that overall it has been a positive system that has provided much needed development in the borough. And just last Tuesday, over £500,000 worth of funding was allocated to Popley through the LIF scheme. This is recent proof that LIF is having a genuinely positive impact on the borough. However, Madam Mayor, I do believe that the current LIF scheme is fundamentally flawed and in need of reform. Yes, the scheme to date has provided £2 million worth of infrastructure. I'm pleased to have played a part in securing funding for projects in my very own ward. However, it is too focused on individual wards rather than communities and the borough more widely. Communities are not based around arbitrary ward boundaries. The residents that I represent in Ruxdown do not suddenly halt at the A339, which is where the ward boundary stops. They travel into Winklebury, which under the current system receives a diabolically minuscule amount of money, as I'm sure my friends, the members for Winklebury, will agree. This, Madam Mayor, is deeply unfair. Ruxdown is all new development. Popley is a mixture of old and new. Winklebury has no new development, and I know it needs some money to fund infrastructure for everything that they need and they want to do. There are also some significantly large infrastructure projects that, may I suggest, as an example, would be the upgrade of the Roman Road roundabout, that would benefit the residents of Winklebury, of Ruxdown and Popley, probably every resident in the borough. I would also suggest that it is not a pet project. I find it deeply confusing as to why the Labour Party has brought forward this motion. Look at some of the wards they represent: Butskin, South Ham and Councillor Harvey's Norden. These are all areas that under a revised LIF scheme could all see a significant increase in infrastructure funding. Why is it that these Labour councillors are denying their wards the money they so need? Indeed, in October's CEP committee, Councillor Harvey, I heard him myself, expressed such a desire when talking about LIF, and I quote, The money could achieve outcomes for residents who are seeing the developments impact their communities beyond simply just a direct link. These proposals do that, as well as other great things. They retain money for infrastructure in local communities that have had development. They make money available for the broader wide communities that need infrastructure improvement. And this specific proposal provides a step change in the Borough Council's ability to support strategic infrastructure projects that benefit everyone. This is not rural Tories stealing Popley's money, whilst they oppose giving money towards like Southam, Buckskin and Winklebury. So, Madam Mayor, I will not be supporting the motion today, and I urge everybody in this chamber to do the same and support the development of our borough more widely.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been here.
Maiden speech. Congratulations.
I'll try again, Madam Mayor. I remember the lift scheme when we first set it up, and when the new homes bonus came to us and we set up the lift scheme, we were working off a blank canvas. There was no previous scheme we could follow or look at. We had to start somewhere. And I remember when it came to the council chamber, speaking up on that lift scheme and supporting it and helping get it voted through. I also remember, of course, the Labour Party opposed the lift scheme when it was launched, saying it should all be thrown into a central pot to be used for infrastructure. But there we go, we move on. Now, when the lift scheme was set up, well, no, it's affordable housing, wasn't it? But it certainly opposed the lift scheme whichever way they did it. Now, we knew when the scheme was set up that at some point we'd have to revisit it. And last year, Councillor Parker and I moved a motion to say it was time for that review. We'd realised in our ward we've had a number of applications from very good causes, Multicultural Forum, Basingstoke Voluntary Services and the Camrose, all asking and inquiring about schemes, but we realised those schemes cover the wider borough, not just Eastdrop, and we couldn't afford to fund all those schemes, and so the scheme needed to be looked at so good organisations that have a cross-town, cross-borough purpose could also access the funding. Now, the review of that scheme went to, I think it was CEP in October, and I think it's in the minute book, and there's very clear reference that perhaps the scheme that has been devised by the portfolio holder isn't quite right, or isn't very right at all, and needs looking at again. And my understanding is of this week, he's still got an open mind and is considered, ready to consider views. So we're a bit premature with this, it's Cabinet's view and it's been decided, because I don't think it has. I think it's still up for discussion. So the motion not only is premature, it's also confused me, because what Labour are doing is moving a motion that looks to support a policy they opposed, contrary to a motion to change it that they supported. And it's a theme building tonight. I've had the Labour Party tell me I deserve a pay rise at work, but not when I get here. I've had the Labour Party tell me they're desperate to preserve a bus service they think should be changed, and now they're telling me that they want to protect a policy they oppose against a motion they supported. They are doing the political equivalent of the Kama Sutra and changing position all the time. So I won't support this motion. I don't want anyone to think I'm endorsing the way forward offered in October to CEP, but I think to put a 40% on at this stage when we're still working on the final outcome is premature.
Thank you. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to make a couple of points, but already Councillor James and actually Councillor Bound has covered quite a lot of them, but I would like to add a few issues that have come up. Firstly, regarding the LIF, and it's funded from New Homes Bonus, as many of you, maybe not all of you, are aware. And as part of the government policy of allocating New Homes Bonus, there is no statutory requirement to make any allocation to local communities on a direct basis. And I do find it interesting that in 2013 that the Labour group were antagonistic to localisation, and obviously the success of the proposal as was put through at Council has meant they've changed their mind, which is very nice and very, very impressive. However, I would argue now that they are still behind the curve, because we're now embarking on a new direction, and a new direction in terms of the way the borough develops. But going back to the LIF, some consultation would be required within the original New Homes Bonus scheme, and that has happened. And that will continue with the LIF, either in its existing format where ring-fenced budgets are, or in the new LIF, as has been proposed with the 5% from whatever remains of new homes bonus. But it is also very clear that government is consulting on new homes bonus. What will it be in the future? We don't know. We don't know how much it will be and what time frame. The figures that have been quoted, I'm afraid, go back to being scaremongering. They are not accurate. There is no idea what LIF will be in the future because we don't know what new homes bonus will be in the future. So to say you're taking our money, actually you're taking something that we don't know exists maybe in the future. And I think that is intentionally, it's scaremongering to the people who listen to us, and it's scaremongering to the community in general. Why we want to make some change? Well, the world changes as we go along. We were successful in implementing the new homes bonus. Clearly, the wards that have benefited of it have been very pleased with the amount of LIF has been given to them. And last week has been said, you know, £500,000 has been allocated properly. There is some £280,000 left in that budget, and that I'm sure will be spent very wisely to develop resources for that community. But the nature of development is changing. That's why we need to make change. We need to be able to think about the community in a wider sense. We have major development coming in the next number of years. And it's to say that vast amounts of money can deal with small problems in small areas doesn't work in the future. We have to look on the bigger scale. We also need to support existing communities. Absolutely agree with that, and that's why there is a budget left, which all can apply for. You know, it's 5% of whatever that new homes bonus allocation will be. But it is open. And the second issue we need to deal with why change is because we already have two community budgets, the Chef budget and the LFCB budget, which are dealing with our existing infrastructure, which is deteriorating and growing old. And currently there is very little way of developing support for those communities who have these old infrastructures that also need to be looked after. And currently both those budgets are oversubscribed, and residents within those wards can have very little opportunity to see how their infrastructure can change. So it's about fairness as well. And quite clearly, funding is being reduced. Funding is scarce. We have, as a council, to make best use of whatever resource is available. So the future is the strategic capital reserve will grow because of the needs of strategic development. We'll also look at the community existing infrastructure. But more importantly with this is also to have a transparent application process, which has been said will be weighted to those wards and areas that have undertaken and have received development. So I don't believe that this motion does anything more than actually just raises more scaremongering. It says, oh, it's all going to be dreadful. Actually, we're looking forward, and I would ask members to think in the future. Clearly, the response of the Labour group to this particular, raising this motion is again looking backwards. It's saying, oh, yeah, we'll keep things as they are. The world has moved on. It is changing, and we need to develop a resource that is compatible with that future. So I will be voting against this motion, and I hope that the members of the Council also will vote against this particular motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
It's not go on. Sorry, thank you. Sorry, Mrs. Mayor. It seems to be undermined everything the government set out to achieve with the new homes bonus. I mean, this is what they said at the outset. We have wasted no time scrapping the ineffective top-down planning system that forced unsustainable development on communities and are returning control of a much faster and more responsive planning system to local people. Well, that seems to have got lost somewhere, but we will not tell communities how or where to build, well that's got lost as well, hasn't it? Or how they should grow, but the new homes bonus will ensure that those communities that go for growth reap the benefits of development, not just the costs. Now we just heard Councillor Tate say that, you know, this is may not happen, doesn't matter about the money. Well, if that's the case, then why are you doing it? If the money isn't going to be there, why bother changing it? The reality is this will take money away from those areas that have accepted growth. Whether they particularly want it or not is another issue. That's a moot point at the end of the day. But they're the ones who are suffering. Yes, we do need money in other areas, we know that, but that's a different issue. The point of the new homes bonus was to incentivise councils and residents to accept development. This will not do that. What you're doing will make it even less likely they'll accept it. But of course, that doesn't actually matter, does it? Because people are going to get development dumped on them, whether they like it or not anyway. That's why you're changing this, because The planning system is in such a mess round here that places like Bramley, Overton, Whitchurch are getting massive amounts of development dumped on them because you've screwed up the local plan. And the whole thing, you want to put the money back into Manydown. Well, if we'd have done Manydown 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in this situation now. Had we not gone to the High Court, we'd have £1 million in the bank we could have spent on regenerating other areas, or we could have spent it on developing. It could have gone into Manydown and provided something useful, but we didn't do that, did we? This is just a complete mess, and all you want to do is make the situation worse and undermine your own government. Well, I don't mind you doing that, because the sooner we get rid of them, the better. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Frankham.
Thank you. I'm speaking as Councillor Mrs Frankham from Popley and not Deputy Mayor. First and foremost, can I say I'm not talking about money in the future, I'm talking about what's there now. Popley took the lion's share of the development and were on the list to receive the lion's share of funding. I hope that this council will honour the schemes.
Can we let the councillor speak, please?
Right. Sorry, may I continue? Thank you. I hope that this council will honour the schemes already applied for and the 3 declarations of interest declared whilst the application can be costed and the finer details discussed with residents, groups and our Basingstoke and Dean officers. One is for a safe cycle and walking around the ward that includes parts of Rooksdown. The second is for proper services that can be used by the community of Popley and other areas in the Everest community area. The third is for a library and PC use in Everest, which will be for CVs, research, educational qualifications, and that can be used by people in the whole of the borough. So can you please ensure me that these schemes will not suffer by taking away this funding? All the schemes will have a positive effect and be shared by people across the borough. I'm not saying just for Popley, but Popley needs these and so do the borough. I'm not being tight or just for Popley, although, as you know, Popley is the epicentre of the world as far as I'm concerned. So I'd like that assurance, please, Councillor Tate.
Thank you. Councillor Miss Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a councillor for Winklebury, my residents and I are well aware that we do not receive the much-needed investment in the ward. Instead, we continue to compare ourselves to Rooksdown, who have a new community facilities, including a good youth centre, as well as having a new skate park on the way. Winklebury have a tiny youth hut with no money available from the current lift. They had to get their furniture, a basic need, through a grant kindly awarded to the centre from the Worton Community Trust. Small things such as bins in parks and maintenance to public areas are not big requests, but will make a big difference to residents. Why are we always told there is no money, and yet the new areas of Basingstoke have so much at times they struggle to spend it? The only option we have is to wait for the Manydown development to come through, which could take years. This is why the new proposals on the local infrastructure fund is good for my ward and for the borough as a whole. It is important to point out that it is not a statutory requirement for the lift to be made available from the new homes bonus funds. Lift funds were at 4.6 million in April 2015, and after the current round of applications at 3.4 million, a total spend of 1.2 million equates to not even half the money awarded. The new proposal states that for those areas that have been allocated funding, currently will have their funds ring-fenced for 3 years at the current value, after this funding round less 20% of the value. So, for instance, if a new development has 600k with an agreed expenditure of 200k, in this round its residential budget would be 320k, which is the 400k minus the 20%, which will be ring-fenced for a further 3 years. A loss of 80k will not have a detrimental effect on a new development, and it could make a big difference in areas which are in desperate need of investment to improve lives on a daily basis. Overall, for Basingstoke, the new process will allow the council to maintain our ageing local infrastructure as maintaining budgets of unallocated funds, which is not to the best use of our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Cubitt.
Yes,
You
hello.
have about 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mrs Mayor. Just say I won't be supporting this motion because I think that the definition of community, a point raised by Councillor Tilby, was actually for the greater community, not for the wards going forward. I think it's much more sensible. I think the points that Councillor Bound made and Councillor Tate made were extremely accurate about how we take the finances going forward. What we desperately need in this borough is flexibility with regards to the disbursements of the new homes bonus, and we need to have an ability to have a strategic look at all the infrastructure deficits that we know we have already existing at them, and that we know also are going to cost an extortionate amount of money, and the new homes bonus is an obvious place for us to access some of the deficit that we know exists. Our central drivers have to be for the betterment of our borough, and I have to say that comments about why Winklebury hasn't had any money in the past is not really relevant. I mean, I can understand why the fact that the boundaries are not relevant in terms of strategic infrastructure, but maybe I suggest a Winklebury councillor ought to get on the cabinet, and then maybe you might get some monies that you obviously haven't had up until now. Thank you.
Councillor Frost, there's about 20 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I would like to thank the Labour Group opposite for proposing this motion, as it yet again demonstrates in my mind just how far out of touch they are with the majority of my residents. Councillors opposite will pontificate and harumph in this chamber committee and in their election newspapers, while Councillor Potter wears the same top in most of the photos, bemoaning that it's unfair to reduce the community allocation of the new homes bonus from 40% to 5%. Taken in isolation, the reduction might seem unfair, but in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. So whilst it is proposed to reduce the percentage allocation that communities are automatically allocated, it is also proposed to increase the allocations of the Revenue Support Fund from 20% to 25%.
I think that's about it. Your time's up. Thank you. Ask Councillor Cousins to sum up, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank councillors for their contribution, and I do have some sympathy with Councillor Edwards, who mentioned the underfunding of Winklebury. But let me assure her it's not new development's fault that Winklebury has been underfunded. It's because your cabinet have underfunded the frontline services. That's the reason why you haven't had the bins. That's the reason why you haven't had the necessary things installed. It's the cabinet's fault for underfunding the frontline services. Madam Mayor, back to this motion. The Tories have plainly and overtly put out there that they're quite happy to take the funding out of wards and communities that have accepted or will accept development. Councillor Bound made a point that we agree with, that the current lift system isn't as good as it should be. We agree with that. We think that there are some changes, some fundamental changes that should be made. And again, it ties in with Councillor Edwards, who said that the residents of Winklebury are envious of the residents of Rixdown. But under the current rules, they can co-sign an agreement. They could borrow some of that lift funding from Rixdown. So I would suggest that they look into that. Perhaps they could do it that way. Madam Mayor, I once again urge councillors to support this motion. A change from 40% to 5% is completely unacceptable, and I hope all councillors, all residents, all communities can see that. Thank you.
Right, we move to the vote. I am presuming you want another recorded vote. Electronic recorded vote. Right, can we open the vote, please? Votes open. Right, the vote's now closed. And the motion's lost. Right, we now move on to the minutes of the meetings. Can I take those en bloc? All agree? Right, we're moving on to questions. First question, Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to ask...
Your mic's not on.
I'm replying to the second one, wasn't I? Oh, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. My question to the Cabinet Member for Communities, Service Delivery and Improvement is, would the Cabinet Member for Communities, Service Delivery and Improvement agree with me that the decision to extend the free parking period at the top of the town from 30 minutes to an hour will be beneficial to both shoppers and businesses alike, further contributing to the long-term economic growth and prosperity in the borough?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. In giving your answer, I'd just like to quote Mark Twain, who was credited with saying, "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story," and that seems to be quite appropriate this evening. Sometimes facts and reality, however, do get in the way of a good story, and this is, to me, a case in point. Contrary to the recent stories of a massive rise in the cost of parking in the borough, let me introduce some facts and reality to give you my answer. Fact, the introduction of 1 hour free parking will benefit some 187,000 parking events, or 25% of the total parking, or 50% of the short-term parking, the largest slime top by any factor. Fact, yes, there have been increases beyond the rate of inflation in other slots, but it is a fact that Basingstoke-and-Deane Borough Council remains the lowest cost parking overall in this area. It's lower than Fleet, lower than Andover, lower than Newbury, lower than Reading, Southampton, Guildford and Festival Place. Fact, commuter charges in Basingstoke-and-Deane Borough Council car parks remain lower than Network Rail's at £8 against £12. And fact, residents' permit charges have been reduced by 10% this year. And a final fact, the overall revenue raised by parking has increased by 1%, and the benefit is being reinvested to improve the experience of parkers. New charging mechanisms, CCTV, and patrol with personal CCTV for enforcement. This administration is committed to its long-term plan for economic growth and prosperity, and is delivering through its parking plan benefits for shoppers, visitors and business owners, and I'm sure it will not be moved from this by media headlines and inaccurate discussion.
Supplementary? No. Right. Councillor Harvey, I believe that Councillor Raffel is going to answer this question in the leader's absence.
I was going to say, obviously my question is on the order paper and relates to many of the concerns that have been raised recently from communities around the town centre, in particular residents raising it directly with me in my own ward. I would be very happy to receive a written response from the leader of the council. I didn't realise Councillor Raffel was going to step in, but I would like a written response from the leader of the council, seeing as I asked the leader of the council the question, and I'm happy to wait for it.
Well, Madam Mayor, the councillor is going to get an answer from me. Can I tell all members that we are fully aware of the difficulties that our residents are suffering. I myself went to Tadley early on Monday morning. It took me 20 minutes to get there and 45 minutes to get back. And I was late tonight because of the consequential congestion from the Black Dam roundabout going into the centre of Basingstoke. But as we know, there is no point in us beating our steering wheels and saying we wish we could travel quicker, and there's no point in us hand-wringing in this chamber about these problems, because it won't make the developments and improvements happen any quicker. What we have done as a cabinet is addressed at the highest levels to see what can be done to increase the throughput of traffic through the Black Dam roundabout. We've been told, and I accept this, that if they widen the flow of traffic through, it would put the workforce at risk. It would potentially endanger them, because the greater the flow of traffic, the faster it flows through. And I don't think any of us would want to say, well, we saved a few days and a serious injury occurred as a consequence. What we've also done is got agreement from Hampshire County Council and the Highways England that the road developments will be phased, so that the improvements at Black Dam will be completed before the serious work on the A33 starts at the Popley end, and that will then be completed before the Binfields Road and Crockford Road junctions are then improved further up the A33, and those latter improvements will be conducted at the same time with the same contractor, so as it were there will be one lot of disruption rather than multiple disruption. All of that is meant to assist in circumstances which we fully understand are difficult. But as I say, this is a good news story overall, because where we are is with a substantial amount of investment that at long last and has been desperately needed in the past has come to this borough. And as we see that improvement, yes, there will be, as it were, annoyance at the disruption. And of course, we should remember that our roads aren't just used by our residents, but by many others who come through our borough. There will be annoyance at that disruption, but let's hope that when those improvements are put into place, most of them will be in place by the end of next year, some in a year or two after that, that we will, as it were, look back on this time as a distant memory and be pleased with those improvements as we benefit from them.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for that response, and I think the issue relates not just to the point about the improvements and the positive nature that they are. I mean, no one's going to disagree with that. I think it is about the coordination of the works. I'm pleased to hear about the coordination of the roundabouts, and I think that is important. It isn't just they, though. It's difficult at the best of times when County dig up New Road, or for that matter County dig up Churchill Way, to relay it, and highways do so, and you wind up with the knock-on impacts of an uncoordinated programme. So if we're going to have a coordinated programme, I think that is a big step forward. And many residents have raised that consistently over the past few months about that, Madam Mayor. May I say that the issue isn't just that, and I think the Cabinet need to address the rat running and the speed issues that we've noticed on localised roads created by people trying to divert and get around. So I would like the Cabinet to take on board the concerns of residents, not just about the main routes, accepting what the Cabinet Member has said, but I would ask him to also take on board our residents concerned about the speed of traffic on the local roads because of people trying to get off and get round, and the rat running that that's also creating. It is an issue, and I would appreciate the Cabinet's attention to it.
Madam Mayor, I sensed the question, was I aware? And yes, I am, because as I was coming down from the Oak Ridge hospital and down towards, I think it's towards the station, the car in front of me was stuck in the traffic and shot round the back through Norden, no doubt to come out the other end of the station. And I know from my own experience of going through Old Basing and the various signs that people have put up to try and discourage people from doing so, the difficulties they are suffering. And so it's not just the urban areas, as the member has suggested, Madam Mayor, it's actually surrounding communities around Basingstoke that are suffering from the congestion of the Black Dam roundabout and its consequential effect. So I'm well aware of that, and can I say the leader will be addressing this topic with the leader of Hampshire County Council and senior officers next week.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Bound.
As per the order paper, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bound, I understand that Hampshire County Council have made a decision to stop making a payment to West Berkshire for the residents of Hampshire to use the household waste recycling centre across the border, but that doesn't mean that West Berkshire are going to stop Hampshire residents from using that service. They haven't given any indication that they're going to do that. If they did that, the question is how would they police it? They may have to impose a charge on Hampshire residents, but then how would they know that they're Hampshire residents and not West Berkshire residents? So at the moment there's no indication from West Berkshire that when that payment stops on the 1st of April next year, that Hampshire residents will be stopped from doing that. I mean, there's problems all across Hampshire because there's a household waste recycling centre on the border with Dorset, and loads of Dorset residents use that Hampshire centre. So it's up to West Berkshire what happens, but at the moment there's no indication that residents will be stopped from using that, and the payments will be stopped in April.
Supplementary?
Yes, please. I believe actually down in Dorset they actually ask for council tax bills to be shown. However, bearing in mind that previous portfolio holders, along with Hampshire County Council officers, have always pointed out to me that West Berkshire facilities subsidised by Hampshire County Council taxpayers were available to Tadley residents, and now these same residents will have to travel to Wade Road to recycle, would she assure me that she will be using the offices of Baingstoke and Dean Borough Council to exert pressure on Hampshire County Council to use some of these subsidies they're saving to improve the dire situation that presently exists at Wade Road, particularly as there is bound to be a lot of extra usage from Tadley residents.
If West Berkshire stop Hampshire residents using it or charge it, then you may imply that there would then be more usage at Wade Road. But at the moment, as I say, West Berkshire have not said they are going to stop Hampshire residents using their recycling centre. And I do agree that there may be issues to look at in relation to the Wade Road, but that's a separate matter. And I have got briefings of county officers and officers from here lined up for January to discuss those problems, so that is being looked at.
Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the record and for the benefit of the webcast, my question relates to pavement parking as per the order paper.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with the Councillor that there can be really nothing as important as the issues of safety, especially for young people and those with disabilities, particularly around schools, school entries and exits. This problem is indeed evidenced across the borough, and whilst I was not aware of the debate in Parliament that he has reported on in his question, I have no problem in agreeing to both the points that he has raised. One, to ensure that the results of studies are forwarded to the LGA as part of the evidence gathering, and secondly, to use council resources to publicise the evidence gathering itself and its links to government departments. In addition, I can also add that this issue has been discussed with officers following the petition that was raised by the young people of the Fairfield School, and with a review to reviewing the potential for rescheduling the patrol routes of CSPOs to become more visible at school entry and exit times. And the use of worn CCTV by the CSPO team may also provide suitable evidence and deterrent as well. I also have received a draft of a reply to Mrs Easton, which is, I think, something you're aware of. I believe that the letter may not have gone out yet, so I'm not really at liberty to put it out into the public environment. But to paraphrase some of the issues within it, there has been discussion with HCC officers regarding the physical solutions, either parking controls or physical barriers to prevent encroachment on the footway and verge. And HCC has agreed to include this in the package of local highway works to complement the expansion of King's Furlong School. I believe there is a meeting to be held at the school on the 14th of December, and that should be then presented in full at that particular meeting. And the site of the drawings relevant to this should be shortly available to both you as ward councillors and to Mrs Eaton, who has also been in correspondence as well.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the portfolio holder, as it would have been disappointing to miss the opportunity to contribute to those roundtable discussions, which we hope will help to find the solution to the pavement parking problem that affects so many of our residents and in so many of our wards. Does he not agree that in addition this council and many of its members have learnt a great deal about parking on pavements on many of our new large-scale developments in the borough, in particular our urban areas? And with the large number of new homes being proposed in the next few years, it will be important that those lessons on parking are not only learnt, but also shared with government as part of their studies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that with the development of new sites in the borough in the next few years, the management and the design of parking is an absolute importance within the design concept. And particularly relating to your question regarding schools and public areas to ensure safety. So yes, I do agree with you with that.
Right, thank you. Brings us to the end of the meeting.